What's going on, guys? Mediocre PC Gaming here, back with another video. And after I put out my T10 Pestilence farming guide yesterday, I was doing some more looking on Diablo fans, and I found out about an item. It's the Scythe of the Cycle, and I completely had no idea that this item existed, but had I known it, I would have put it in place of the nearest Black Death. Because essentially what the Scythe of the Cycle does is increases secondary skills, so that means Bone Spear, by 300%. As long as we're using bone armor, which we will be using bone armor on the build still, but we won't be using Nearest Black Death because that only allowed us to get 200% bonus damage. It will reduce the cooldown of bone armor by 4 seconds every time we use bone scythe, or sorry, bone spear. But the cooldown and duration ratio of bone armor is already so high that it's very hard to use enough bone spears to actually get any downtime on bone armor, even without any cooldown reduction that we've already stacked on our gear. So essentially what this build is doing is taking advantage of the Scythe of the Cycle. We've also taken off Decay Golem, and we're using Flesh Golem. That's the passive that we, or the skill rune that we wanted to use but could not because we wanted to get that bonus damage. So we'll be using Flesh Golem so that every time we activate our golem, he'll spawn 8 corpses for us, and everything else is pretty much the same. I did change the passives because I wanted to outfit this build and have the capability of pushing greater rifts. Again, that's not the intent of this build. The intent of this build now is to, you can probably farm with that 100% damage increase, you can go up to probably Torment 11 or Torment 12 in groups, but I did change this passive to stand alone to increase our armor by 100%. Necromancer is an intelligence-based class, which means they're going to be pretty high in all res but pretty low in armor generally. So you want to be able to, further increase your armor if you can. But again, if you're not pushing greater rifts, I would again recommend Fueled by Death to give you some more movement speed. And we again, for the greater rift pushing build, you're probably going to want to use Potency to again increase your armor for 2 seconds after Blood Rush. If not, then maybe Molting for more corpse generation on the Rift Guardian, because it's going to be pretty hard for us to keep up our essence on the Rift Guardian if they don't have ads. So everything else about the build is the same again, except for the, we're going to be using the Endless Walk set. So I figured out that, well, not figured out, but I noticed, with basically needing no cooldown reduction to keep 100% uptime on bone armor, there was no reason for us to really use Obsidian the Ring of the Zodiac, and we could definitely take advantage of the Traveler's Pledge 100% damage reduction, or sorry, 100% damage boost and 50% damage reduction. So that's just gonna, it's pretty much just all bonuses for this build when using the Traveler's Pledge. We won't be able to use the Hellfire Amulet and get a 4th passive, or a 5th passive. So that's why I am using Standalone now in the passive skills and took out Fueled by Death. If there's any passive that you're going to want to take out when pushing, you're probably going to want to take out Fueled by Death. You might could take out Overwhelming Essence if you think you're okay with Essence, but I wouldn't recommend it. So that's pretty much everything that's changed with the build. Lastly, in terms of gems, when pushing greater rifts, you pretty much are going to have to use Stricken when you get to much healthier Rift Guardians. So the gem that I would probably recommend taking out would be Zay's Stone of Vengeance in place of Stricken. But I'm going to run a 65, so I won't need Stricken. But if you are going anywhere like higher than probably a 70, 75, you're probably going to want to take out Zay's Stone and put on Stricken, because I think, if you can stack Stricken fast enough using Bone Spear, Bone Armor, your Golem, and the Corpse Lances that are going to be coming out of the corpses that you consume, you'll eventually be able to do more damage using Stricken than you ever would be able to with Zay's Stone. You can take out the Gogok of Swiftness as well, but that's going to reduce your toughness a little bit because you are getting dodge chance from that, and it's also going to take away from some of your cooldown reduction. But cooldown reduction, like I've said, isn't really too important to this build anymore, now that the only cooldown that you're really going to try to keep up is bone armor, which maintains itself. But it's your choice. I'd still keep in Trap, definitely. It's 40% damage bonus just at rank 84, which really isn't too high. So it's your choice. You can either, Gogok I feel like makes the build function better, but Zay's Stone of course is more damage. So if you're really trying to push, I guess take out Gogok. And then in the helm, we can probably definitely take out the diamond out of the helm, and you could put in an amethyst for more health. I'm only 665 or 675k HP right now, so I could definitely benefit from an amethyst. But I'm just gonna leave the build as how it is, and run into a greater of 65 now to show just how powerful this build has become just by switching out a few items. Let's go ahead and get into it. So the build will still play the same. You're gonna want to get your numlock trick going, and probably going to want to shoot at a distance with some bone spears, jump in and get that bone armor going up so you can get your damage reduction, then cast Decrepify and again keep that damage reduction up, and just try and keep up your bone armor stacks and just keep up bone armor in general, which again isn't going to be a challenge for you guys. Shouldn't be a challenge at all. It's to at least keep bone armor up, at least one stack. It'll be pretty easy. And then just move on to the next deck. And this build is super tanky now. At least for torments. As long as you remember to keep up Decrepify, I mean, it's crazy how tanky this build really is. At least compared to some of the other squishy Necromancer builds. Now, of course, you're not going to be able to stand in the middle of just a bunch of mobs and be immune. So the reason I think this set, almost in general, not just the build, but the entire set, I don't think is made for Greater Rift pushing, because I mean, if you work in a generator, it isn't that bad, but essentially with this build, and I think with most of the builds that are going to be made off of this set, your essence generation is going to be come from corpses, and I think in Greater Rifts it's going to be just too hard to have a good supply of corpses. Your golem is going to continue to supply you with corpses, and you can use the molting rune on Blood Rush. I still like to use potency, just because Blood Rush is kind of your get in get out button, and you want to make sure whenever you teleport you're going to have as much armor and safety as possible, just in case you teleport somewhere bad. But I just think it's going to be too hard to generate a sufficient amount of corpses for this build to really function at higher Greater Rifts whenever you're not killing tons of trash. But maybe if you manage to get a lot of good pulls, I could definitely see where this build and this set in general will shine greatly in density, because of the Blighted Marrow rune, increasing Bone Spear's damage by 100%, or not 100%, 14% for every enemy pass through. That's pretty huge. It kind of reminds me of using a charge barb, where you're going to want to charge through just as many enemies as possible to get that damage bonus. And I definitely like builds that function best with density the most, but I find that builds that function best with density normally aren't always great for pushing whenever they require density to function, And I'm not sure why I was playing so passively there. I guess I just forgot that I had my shield on. So you're still going to want to try and use your golem on cooldown just to be safe, make sure you have enough corpses. But it's not going to be required for damage anymore. Again, the only thing you're going to want to make sure you're doing is keeping bone armor up, but that's a no-brainer anyways. It's something you'd want to do regardless, because it is your damage, it's part of your damage reduction anyways. So you notice I'm not really using Decrepify too much. I think if you take this exact setup, you can probably run all the way up to T13 in groups. I don't know how exactly how well it'll do, but I think you could do fine in T13 in groups. You won't be really fast. Necromancer isn't, at least so far, we haven't found any extremely fast Necromancer builds that I haven't found any. But yeah, I think you'd be able to carry your own in T13 4-mans. But you definitely, if you're not in T13, say you're in T11, maybe T12, and definitely anything below that. You probably can take off Decrepify and the Decrepify belt, and you can put on Frailty, and that will make your speed farming, you know, essentially 15% faster. And then you could probably put on a Witching Hour or something like that. Definitely help out with your farming. So I'm not certain if illusionists spawn corpses. I'm pretty certain they do. I'm pretty sure the illusions spawn corpses, that is. Regardless, I do know the illusions will help stack damage for Bone Spear. Illusionists are always good for this build. So I'm actually really glad that I would happen to be looking around on Diablo fans and did see that this item is pretty much an upgrade to the Black Death. I'm thinking now to myself, you know, why anyone would use the Black Death. I guess if there's just the Necromancer only has you know, 3 elements if you count physical as an element to choose from. I guess I should say 3 damage types to even choose from. So I wouldn't think it would be too hard to you know, create a build where every single skill is a poison skill. In which case that would be 6 times 65. That would be about almost a 400% damage increase, which 400% is obviously greater than 300%. But unless you create a build in which, you know, every single skill is poison, you know, even if you have 5 out of 6 skills as poison, that would be, you know, about a 330% damage upgrade, which is better than the Scythe of the Cycle still. But I'd be interested to see if anyone can actually create, you know, a build which utilizes at least 5 out of 6 poison skills. I might try and see if I can figure one out myself. But for now, I like this variant of the this Bone Spear variant of the Pestilence build. And you can see here, I mean, obviously this isn't a Rift Guardian, but you can see here how this build is going to struggle on the Rift Guardian when there's no ads around. So you're just losing a bunch of damage because you're not able to cast Bone Spear enough. You don't have any density to stack that Bone Spear damage in the first place. You know, it's just not going to be the best of times. Channeling Pylon actually might. Okay, there's our first death. I was hoping I could go through it without dying, but let's see. We're gonna have to be careful about this. Make sure we can get our stacks back up. Alright. So again, I was going to say that Channeling Pylon is definitely something we're probably going to want to save for the Rift Guardian if we can get enough density, or enough clear time, I guess I should say, to spawn it around it. Hopefully we can at least spawn it on this floor. Should probably open that door and let in some of those mobs. So I'm really not taking too much advantage of the Zay's Stone. I think the Zay's Stone is... I mean, there's not a ton of good things you can put there. I mean, at least when strictly Torment farming. When Torment farming, I'd probably put a Bane of the Trapped in, or not a Bane of the Trapped, Bane of the Powerful in place of like a Gogok, and maybe in place of the Zay's Stone. I do like using the Gogok though because it gives you, I like the cooldown reduction on your Blood Rush. I think that's kind of, you know, the only thing that makes this build relatively fast, and it's still not even relatively fast, but it does at least add some mobility to it, to the build. You know, I definitely think, I was talking with my friend, I was just kind of discussing this build in general. I think it's going to be possible to push with this build. I mean, as you can see, I'm doing a 65 pretty easily. You know, I do have 950 Paragon, but this is with 0 augments, and you know, just the gear that I put together myself within the last few days. And I haven't really been gearing for this build either, you know. But I think it's going to be possible to push this build. Like, the potential is there, but I'm mostly worried about corpse generation. And as you can see there, my golem actually died. You got to be conscious of that. That's why you want to try and, unlike I have been doing, you want to try and use that golem on cooldown, because if your golem dies, when you activate him, he won't do his, you know, his active. He'll just simply respawn. But if he's not around, you know, he's not going to be spawning those corpses for you, and he's not going to be essentially generating essence for you. You can definitely see this build slows down once you hit the Rift Guardian. And Rift Guardians that don't spawn adds are just going to be pretty much a no-go for this build, especially once you get up to the higher Rift levels. And I know I've been talking about the pushing and such, but I do want to stress again that this is not a build meant for pushing. This is just something that I'm pretty confident at this point can run T13, even in groups, you know, maybe augments a little bit. But when you first put together this build, I can say with, you know, 95 to 100% confidence that you'll be able to run T11 in groups, no problem. Maybe probably won't be able to one-shot everything, but I think you should be able to two-shot everything with crits. It's definitely does make Bone Spear very, very powerful. Okay, so that was about a 12-minute clear. I did make sure that this build could run a 65 right beforehand, and I got it in 11 minutes. So I think that's mostly the fault of this build just being pretty slow. The damage is there. You just need to be able to build up density and just be a little bit faster. So let's go ahead and upgrade our Gogok. That'll help us out. And as you can see, the only high level gem I had was my we got an unnumlock to get to town. The only high level gem I had was my Band of the Trap. That was 84. Everything else was at 30. Gogok was at 26. And I know a lot of people wouldn't even consider 84 to be high leveled. So yeah, that's pretty much the updated build. I'm going to create a Diablo fans guide. I'll have a few stat priorities on there. I'm honestly not entirely certain exactly which stat priority we're going to go for everything. Like, I know on these shoulders you definitely resource cost reduction can definitely help, but I don't think it's going to be too mandatory. I might actually play around with the build but stacking a bunch of resource cost reduction, but I don't think cooldown is going to be needed. I think resource cost reduction actually could really benefit this build, because it does become very essence hungry once you're fighting 1 or 2 mobs. But yeah, I'm gonna put up a Diablo fans build guide. I'll link it down in the description, and I'm definitely going to link from my original video, which had a little bit of popularity, to this video, so that everyone knows that this is definitely the better setup you want to use, even if you're not using it for pushing. It's just flat out better. You're less worried about cooldowns. You can use the Flesh Goblin, so better resource generation for you, more damage, and more damage reduction. So yeah, this is definitely the better variant of the build. So I'm going to link from that first video to this one, just so everyone can know. But that's all I got to say for today. Let me know if I missed anything out, missed out on anything. I'm still not, you know, really proficient with the Necromancer and all of his items. So again, I might be missing another item which could potentially boost this build even further. But until the next video, I will see you guys later. Peace out.